Today on the podcast, we're joined by Mark Miller, Cornell alumni, lifelong entrepreneur, and the newest member of the student agency's board of directors. Unlike many who set out to manage companies, Mark has always been wired to build them. As a student, he ran a refrigerator and fan rental business that was actually competitors with student agencies long before he ever imagined joining its board. From those early ventures, Mark carved out a remarkable career as a founder, builder, and investor, creating and leading multiple companies at the intersection of education, publishing, and technology. He's now the managing partner at Good Harbor Partners and the co-founder of LearnLaunch, helping education technology startups grow and scale. But his story starts right here in Ithaca, working out of the same 409 College Avenue space that once held just a handful of entrepreneurship students in an era before venture capital or startup culture even existed. Today, as he returns to student agencies, Mark brings that same entrepreneurial spirit full circle. His mission is clear to help student agencies in Cornell reignite the entrepreneurial roots built that were built on at a time when higher education faces one of its greater existential challenges. Mark, welcome to the show.
That was beautiful, Willie. Thank you. Wow. ChatGPT is pretty good.
Yeah, did we miss anything?
Well, there's a lot of detail, but that generally was pretty awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, so Mark, talk to us about what you're up to today and, how did you get there? How did student impact agencies impact your life? And then why are you back?
All right. I'll start with how more of the sort of stuff historically with student agencies, which brought me to where I am today. I was the prototypical entrepreneur, and the interesting thing was the sort of refrigerator fan rental was one thing. Uh, I had a Chinese food delivery service, the first non-pizza delivery in Ithaca that a friend of mine started and I acquired. That's how I funded Take Note. My first business I won the business plan competition for in the business school with Professor Dave Allers and then David Ben Daniel, who are kind of luminaries to the sort of alums that maybe if they ever listen to this. And so I was an entrepreneur, and it was before this was kind of in vogue. I mean, there was me and the guy who did the student travel services, and then there were the kind of the managers of businesses, student agencies, and I knew some of them independent of, in part because yes, I was a competitor, and I ran into folks. But there was this guy Peter Everett who was the president of student agencies, and a great guy who started around the time Sharon was there, I think, or a guy named Dennis Tevin. I'm not exactly sure. But Peter and I were great friends, and Mike Carangeland, who I got to know after that. And, the idea of me running my businesses out of student agencies is one of those kind of lark things. I mean, after the fact, it's easy and interesting to talk about kind of like this concept of co-working space, but it really was. I've always wanted to be supporting people who have new business ideas and helping give the guidance. I just really get a lot of pleasure at it, like you do, Dan. And so I think this guy, Rich Wider, who was kind of in your role, Dan, I think was the first person to have that job. I had forgotten about it till he reminded me after I posted the thing online that it was actually I went to see him, uh, and it was before Dan. God, I'm sorry, the names all get confused. But the idea was I'd rent a desk, and sort of the derivative was I'd rent a desk, run my businesses, and then in turn I'd get to know people. And there's an incredible, collection of people who came through. I mean, Dan Summer was one of the people. Ken Eisner, who remains a good friend of mine, was one of the people. Um, Peter and others, I mean, many others. Gus Warren, who became a VC, helped. He did student agencies. Then he helped me write my first business plan. And then I said, you could be a really good venture capitalist. And actually, he has ended up becoming a very successful VC. And I think he's part of Big Red Ventures now. I'm not sure. I haven't seen Gus in a while. The folks who built my first website were Bill Trenchard and then the guys from Wayfair, Neeraj and Steve, who had a web development business. And so the idea of bringing some of those kind of people into student agencies to do stuff for the managers of the businesses, it was more kind of my entrepreneurial spirit that like a lot of the people were managers and they didn't necessarily have that entrepreneurial thing. So it just was such an incredible opportunity to get to know people, work alongside them, and feel really good about those relationships. But the part of it that's different is it's different being a business manager and entrepreneur. And like we it's like Canada and the US. Like we speak English, but there's a lot big difference between a sort of an entrepreneur who's scrappy, often, not always, and someone who's more kind of a manager. And so the interesting thing was there was always this joke about student agencies acquiring my business take note. And over a period of like a long time, and Dan, you'd find this funny, there were different points at which there was a conversation because I had moved from Ithaca, I'd moved on to other things, and my partner Lubomir kind of ran the business. But it was always this idea at student agencies of kind of buying it, and just it was just we were so far apart on the economics. And not that I'd say we were unreasonable, but I think back to this notion of being more of a manager of things that are going to be around for a long time and be very stable versus being entrepreneurial and really make things grow. And I think that was one of the gaps that I had, and a feeling that made it hard for me to be as engaged with student agencies is that there'd been a lot of things run, and the first couple of years maybe it ran really well, and then it became more of a thing that was just just continued. But I'm an entrepreneur. Like it never is just like okay to just keep it going and pass it along. So my kind of return to this thing, and the odd part of it is totally random. I mean, I went and saw you, Dan, at at reunions to like
You had leftovers together.
we did cold ribs are one of my favorite things, and old mac and cheese, cold ribs and mac and cheese. Seriously, that was awesome. Um, but I've always stayed kind of aware of, and some of the people I see sometimes I had no idea. And then when I wrote the thing about my experience, Aaron reached out to me, and Aaron was one of the other managers that I had really liked when I was there. So here we are, and I think Will, to what you said, the one thing that I'd mentioned that maybe put some more color to how you reflected is, to me, the idea that students that the institution itself is not necessarily as strong, that student has a place to support and represent gaining the skills and competencies, building social capital, and getting the kind of tools that will allow you to be successful. Like I feel really deeply that it's a huge missing link, that academic institutions and the time when you're in college, that's not something that happens as well as it should. And that I'd love to see Cornell and student agencies as the vehicle to support Cornell students, to facilitate work integrated, project based learning experiences, connection to better jobs, etc. And it's complementary to so many of the things that you guys already do in terms of the work you do, the work separately the eLab does, and the value that's derived by the institution, which is not like many other institutions are at risk if they don't do this. Cornell's not at risk. But if we want Cornell students to be competitive to its peer institutions, this is the kind of stuff that I think really can allow us to sort of differentiate Cornell. And I think I made the point once before. Ezra Cornell himself was an entrepreneur. He created this plow that dug holes to lay Morris cable. And that's where he made his millions to then hire really smart people to create this university. So that's how I sort of came back, and that's the role that I really hope to play on the board, and that I'm really excited to be part of.
Amazing.
Yeah. So looking back at your own entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial journey, what lessons or experiences from your time at Cornell do you think are the most valuable for, student entrepreneurs today?
So it's interesting you said, Willie, because I was an arts major, and so it was not my college or my undergraduate academic experience. There was the course entrepreneurship in the business school for undergrads, which was the only course for undergrads to do that kind of thing at the time. Professor Allers and President Daniels were awesome and huge in my life in terms of me writing this business plan and winning the business plan competition for Take Note with a group of other people. I was the only one who tended to pursue the business. But I'd say the other thing is I was responsible. I ran the Student Finance Commission when I was an undergrad. And that was the group that gave the money to all the groups and organizations on campus. So we had the budget, and I was the chairman of the Student Finance Commission. That experience was way more directly impactful to gaining the kind of skills to understand things associated with like my business life. But someone just asked me yesterday something, which is, how did you have the confidence that you knew what to do to start businesses. And I said, the crazy part of it is, and this is the mind of an entrepreneur, it's not that I had confidence. It's not like I thought I had the skills. I just thought I could figure it out. And
Yeah.
that's insane to most people. And it's hard for you to appreciate that one thing. It's sort of like what you don't know sometimes is helpful if you're willing to believe you're going to figure it out. And the second side of it is this concept of risk. I say to people all the time, like for me, sure, there was some financial risk in that I had figured out how to fund take note through my Chinese food delivery service. Um, and I was very cost efficient how I did it. I didn't have something where I'd spend a bunch of money to hopefully create a business. I built it based on its cash flow and some funding that I had. I didn't raise any outside capital. But
Yeah, I can
if you don't
totally
believe
relate
in
to that. So
yourself,
the whole sort of like you might call it irrational confidence. It tends to be a good, healthy streak in young men, especially. But the belief in yourself that you're just going to figure it out, and sort of if you might relate to this as well. Like if you knew then what you know now, would you have ever taken those risks? My answer is almost categorically no, except for like a couple little strategic things that I did, but where I had already built up a huge amount of know-how through all of the failures that went on before. So, yeah, it's a foreign concept to a lot of people to be willing to risk so much. Um, but I'm excited also to get back into starting new businesses at student agencies. We have several things in the hopper right now. And so, how did you like? Tell us about how you transitioned from being an entrepreneur to your current business, and what is your current business?
okay. So first, let me sort of add on to this. So the would you do it again thing. So when as a founder and entrepreneur, it's an all-in thing, and it does not get easier as you get older. And the question of whether you would go through the pain, again, many entrepreneurs would say no. And I would have to say, retrospectively, I agree. It's hard. It's a hard life. People have no idea how to relate to it either.
No,
They just don't. They did. But the question is, so I did that for many years, and then I helped some people as an advisor grow their companies, and in one case, sell his company. And I realized that, well, I didn't really like investment banking. I know everyone today talks about wanting to be in private equity investment banking, which just cracks me up that you guys really, I'll use that term, private equity investment. You know what I mean? I mean, it's not that you don't know what it means, but you don't really know what it means. Um, it just sounds, but the point is, I didn't really like many people who went into investment banking. Actually, Peter Everett became an investment banker, and his friends were all douchebags. And so I didn't like it. I didn't like the culture. I didn't like the mindset, the arrogance. Just not how I roll. That being said, I helped someone sell a company and realized that I really liked helping people think about what they're trying to accomplish in either growing or selling, sometimes adding more capital and continuing to grow, sometimes selling, or even exploring both and supporting someone. So I built a firm called Good Heart Partners, which does two things. One, we get hired to sell companies. That's very straightforward. But we also have a set of clients who we help them grow. We help serve as their outsourced corp dev team. We help them find talent. We help them find the right parties to provide funding and support them through that process. We help them with strategic partnerships, and then ultimately we sell them. And I love it. And so that's what Good Heart Partners is. And I work in the education market space segment, which I know very well, and I know the buyers. So it's very different. And I'm going to give a little bit of a thing on investment banking, really. So, investment banking, from the standpoint of younger people, is a lot of sitting around doing a lot of modeling and writing PowerPoints, making presentations, and trying to describe stuff that you have no idea about, but you want to sound smart enough so it sounds directionally right. I have a hard time with a lot of those things because smart people who are good, like McKinsey people, at having the right words, the right order. But if you go deeper, a lot of it's usually pretty superficial because if you don't know the domain, it's hard to really explain it. And so that's what I really know this domain. And so the difference to what I do investment banking versus the investment banking that you get at some of the big firms is it's not a process of writing a book and doing financials and sending out and have people put in bids and then saying who are the top three bidders and let's then go to the next step. It's a more bespoke process of going to the parties that it seems like it could make sense for them to buy and engaging with those parties to determine, is this something you want to take a run at? Is it strategic to where you're trying to go, and helping them buy? and then running a competitive process across the parties who have conviction. And I just want to make this point because I think it's a good one. Traditional investment banking is about information asymmetry. It's like you don't have all the information. I'm going to give you enough to put a bid in, and then you'll get to go deeper later if you're among the top bidders. What's ironic about that, particularly for smaller companies that don't have as much proof of revenue growth and EBITDA, is your bid isn't really based on really understanding the company and its management team. It's this thing that can change later. And to the seller, it's really risky that you have people bidding just to get under the covers and understand stuff who then are like, yeah, this isn't quite what we thought. So I have a very different approach to investment banking. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's a very different from the other process, which is a book, a bid, and then we'll expose you to management for an hour, and then you put in another bid. And it's not that other process is wrong, but those are much more proven companies with revenue growth and EBITDA than the ones I work with.
Well, it sounds like you found a niche there where, it's going to be like you said, smaller companies who maybe don't have that track record of great growth, but with you as their partner, they can spend a year or two or three seeking that excellent growth, have it well documented, have their story much tighter, and then go to market based on that data set. So that
That's
sounds
right.
like
Or that they have something really unique that people want that might be technology or might be a product roadmap, and I'm able to get them in front of the senior leadership and potential buyers. I sold the only company Quizlet's ever bought, and that was because I knew they had a hole and a competitive risk. So it wasn't that the company was so proven economically. It was really good, and they paid up because it filled a hole competitively against their competitors.
so. Let's pivot back to kind of student agencies for a second. So take a put on your nostalgia cap and let's go to story time, right? Okay. So knowing that it's mostly like students and parents of students who watch us on this podcast, tell us a story. What's something crazy that happened, memorable that happened? Why would a student want to get into this experience based on what you know?
Why would a student want to get into the experience of doing
Yeah,
something
through
like
a
being a
story though.
student
Like, what's a
agency's
story that you
manager?
can share with
Okay.
us that paints a picture for what they're going to get into that could both be the hell of operation and the tremendous benefit of
Gotcha.
having
Gotcha.
lived through it and been successful.
All right. Well, I loved the way, Willie, you described why you joined and your kind of personal mindset as to being saying yes and being positive. And I thought that was just awesome the way you put that. So I would say uh, uh, anybody who is a student, um, you can have all kinds of different experiences. Some of them can be like just to check a box and say, I did a job, I was an analyst, I was a whatever. And a lot of that stuff is really too often, in my opinion, about the brand. So too many people in your generation or students today, I think, are focused on, I want to get an internship at this name because that name means something. Really having skills is important. Really having experience, really knowing how to work with other people, really showing your grit. Fear is a good motivator, is one thing I like to say, but really showing that you have what it takes will and it is and will continue it and will in the future be more important than a brand. I hope that many of the people who are listening to this understand the opportunity to succeed, fail, learn, improve in a controlled setting with a group of people who are supportive and have the kinds of coaching mindsets that you have, Dan, to help bring out the best in people, where the risk is not as great as it can be as if it's your life and can I pay my rent, is just awesome. It feels like it. It's like, you have the scaffolding, you have the support, but you also have the ability to really do something. It's an amazing transformational thing. Um, and I would say that for many of the people I know, it actually drew out in them a belief in themselves that they didn't have, based on actually really doing something, as opposed to sort of faking it. I think a lot of people sort of have false confidence, have a high IQ and think they can do things, but too often they don't have the real world experience. So I'd say the real world aspect, the scaffolding, the support, the history of and legacy, the sort of team and camaraderie and the legacy of being part of a tradition like student agencies are amazing and incredibly powerful. And also, I will say, as I mentioned earlier, foundational to part of what I think is the founding of Cornell and the tradition that Cornell should really, as a legacy, support, going back to Ezra. It was about this idea. So I think that student agencies is a reality and it's an idea. It's a reality in what you do today, Dan, in terms of managing a set of students, businesses, real estate assets, etc. It's a reality in terms of having a relationship to the university and the e-lab and the things that it does. Um, it's got the space and other things, and I'm very hopeful, as you know, to take those things into the direction of, amplifying this idea of the umbrella of what student agencies is. And for me, if I can help make that happen, I'll feel really good about the time I spend. But this is an awesome group. You guys together in that meeting and the way that people looked at and spoke to you, Dan, it was super inspiring. I mean, you have a great team. And I think being part of a team is another thing that a lot of people don't have as much appreciation for these days. And I think, that really is another part of, as a parent, you understand what that means. Like there's things about the trust and the connections and the, you know, lifelongness. I mean, some of my closest friends remain friends from Cornell, friends from my fraternity, friends from other things. It's a tremendous tradition. It's like one of the most important moments in your life. And these people you're going to be running across for the rest of your life, and you'll remember these times. So I'm just a huge fan, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And Mark, I really agree with how you described it. It's really a spirit and essence of student agencies is, kind of hands-on learning. The best way to learn is just by doing it. So I'm really glad you brought all those points up. To kind
I'm
of,
not. I'm not going to get your words, but this bias to action. Do a great job. Bias to action. Wait, I
Oh, you
mean,
mean the three values?
yeah, I love them.
Yeah, get stuff done, speed wins, and be a professional.
Yeah, awesome. Super simple and powerful.
exactly. We try to live by that inside the office, outside the office, and apply it to everything we do here. But to kind of wrap everything up, if you could walk back into, 409 College Avenue and give you yourself just one piece of advice before starting Take Note and before like launching your career, what would that piece of advice be?
All right, so that's actually hard. It's sort of to the thing with Dan and I were talking at the beginning. If I understood how little I knew, I was creating a publishing company when there was the Mac 128 with discs that used to, crash with 5 pages. There were so many things I made up as I went along. The advice might have been plan a little bit more ahead, uh, because there were things I had to overcome all the time. On the other hand, that's part of what was amazing about it is I just had to figure it out. So I made it hard for myself. Uh, all right, so here it is. Uh, it is super important to have other people close to you who you could depend on. I did this myself to start. I was really lucky to have a guy who was a graduate student from Yugoslavia give me a call named Lumir Stambuk, who was super organized and was a great chief operating officer. I wasn't looking for him. He was looking to do a project on entrepreneurship. And I met a guy named Richard Einbinder, who's a brilliant guy who uh, has had a tremendous career, and Richard helped build kind of a database to help manage the business and also the systems to financially track things. I didn't have a clue. I was totally lucky, and they became my partners. And the combination of skills and were a great fit. I wish I had known that and had figured that out sooner, but it happened, and it wouldn't have the whole thing wouldn't have happened if I didn't have those guys and um, I didn't have a team. So that's the advice: having a group and understanding your strengths and then filling in the holes in your strengths. I didn't even think about it. It just magically occurred that this thing happened, and I was super lucky.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And whenever I coach founders, the number one thing I talk to them about is, hey, no matter what, even if they don't bring it up, you got to make sure you have a great relationship with your co-founders. You got to make sure that they actually have complementary skills. If you have three engineers starting a business together, well, who's going to sell it, right? Who's going to sell the product? Who's going to market the product? Who's going to recruit? Who's going to do the fundraising? If you have, three business people, three sales guys starting a business together, who's going to build it? Who's going to manage it? Who's going to run operations? All those sorts of things. So I completely agree with that advice. Get a diverse skill set in your team and keep that team close. But look, Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. It's been fantastic.